Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, dust lasers, peasants, vassals, meat sacks, tubers, who are yous? I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about GDP in the Eurozone and the creative ways they go about making their budget targets. And I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about this because it broke in Italy, but they include stolen goods, prostitution, and drug activity as part of their GDP. And as it turns out, the story broke about the UK doing the same thing, and also, as it turns out, most of the Eurozone does it, and that's what surprised me. In the next few months, and as a matter of fact, in the next few months, all Eurozone countries that do not already include drugs, prostitution, and other illegal and gray market activities in their GDP will have to do so. They're going to be required to by the 2010 version of the European System of Accounts. And as of September, this becomes obligatory for all Eurozone nations. And there's a quote here. It says, quote, illegal economic actions shall be considered as transactions when all units involved enter the actions by mutual agreement. Thus, purchases, sales, or barter of illegal drugs or stolen property are transactions, while theft is not, unquote. So as it turns out, prostitution is legal in Germany, Hungary, Austria, and Greece, and therefore prostitution is already factored into these countries. And boy, I guess we get a clear picture of what makes Germany an economic powerhouse. It's their hookers. And then we also have Netherlands. Drugs are legal there, of course, and they're included in their GDP. And Italy had already included much of their shadow economy, but will now go a step further, adding drugs, prostitution, black market, alcohol, and cigarettes. And this could increase their GDP by 2%. And interestingly enough, you go back a little further, it turns out Italy first started using this GDP method back in the 1980s, and it added nearly 18% to their GDP. So once again, a thriving market in alcohol, cigarettes, hookers, and drugs. So, if you look at the numbers, apparently, if the U.S. added all of the activity that we have in our country that falls under those categories, it would add $1 trillion to our GDP. So once again, when it comes to the numbers for prostitution, drug trade, alcohol, and cigarettes, America is still number one. And right now, the shadow economy in the U.S. is thought to be about 10% of what our regular GDP is. But in many developing countries, the shadow economy is upwards of 50% of their GDP. I'm sure that's very true when you look across the post-colonial world. And one of the interesting tidbits that came out of the research on this is finding out that U.S. government spending is now 31% of U.S. GDP, and in 1900 it was only 8%. And the reason why I think that's relevant is because if you think about the fact that U.S. government spending is 31% of U.S. GDP right now, and we have a bunch of prostitutes and whores working in the government, then that part of the story is relevant as well. So anyway, as you would imagine, the measurement methods are difficult for some of these things. In the countries where prostitution is legal, of course, it's pretty easy to track most of the prostitution. And in Netherlands, it's easy to track the drugs because it's legal. But when you go to other countries where the drugs are not legal, it becomes very problematic. So the fact that Italy's using rather dubious methods to establish how much drug trade is going on in Italy, they'll probably just figure out how much they need and then use that to make their Eurozone budget targets. And for example, in the Netherlands, they assume that prostitutes have 3 clients a day, whereas the method they use in the UK assumes that prostitutes have 25 clients a week. which works out to roughly the same amount, but so they're just different methodology. Incidentally, they have 58,000 prostitutes in the UK, and I'm sure the U.S. can beat that too, because that's another area that the U.S. would be number one. So under the system, an increase, ironically, under the system, of course, an increase in heroin use or teenage prostitution can help lower a country's borrowing costs. So they have a stake in encouraging all these kind of activities, strangely enough. But there we have it. In the strange world of finance and government and the black markets, the black market economy, we have governments who are so judgmental of these underground activities, and yet find ways to make money off it for themselves. It kind of reminds me of the way the too big to fail banks help give some liquidity and cash into their system by helping launder money for drug cartels and gun runners. So when it comes to making money, nothing is off limits. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.